This was at Barbers Point, same time as the previous situation, and it was the F6, and everybody there had to take turns towing targets when it was their time. You got to sign on the board, this is your target tow today, you'd go out and tow the target. So that's what I was doing. It was my day, and I'd done it before, but this day I got a little brave, young and dumb. That's all it amounts to, because I could tell what was going on all the way, but I didn't prevent it. And I don't know if I did all I could to save it, but I don't know that my action saved it or it's just dumb luck. But I went down to the end of the runway, and you taxi down there, and the ground crew hooks up a rope to the airplane. It goes to the right wing on the F6, I believe. There's a place there to hook up that, and they hooked up this rope, which is, I think, 200 feet long, something like that. And the banner is a kind of a woven fabric metal strands, and a banner about just like an Aerotow banner today with letters on it. It's about, I think, 6 feet vertical height and probably 30 or 40 feet long. I don't know how long they are. They're pretty heavy because there's some metal in it, and at the front, to keep it lined in the air, there's first a big weight on the tow rope, and then a vertical bar, which is a tube of metal with a net of this banner fastened to it to give a place to mount it and keep it vertical like that. And all that's laid on the ground flat when they hook it up, because it won't stand up. So they hook it up to the airplane, and you taxi out the runway, and somebody walks the back end up to keep them dragging too bad across the taxiway ground, whatever that is, usually rough ground. Taxi out the runway, get lined up, and he lines it up straight behind the airplane, and he gets out of the way, and the tower clears you, and you got to hold the brakes and firewall it. Get all the power you can get to get off quick, because if you drag that banner on the ground too long, it just shreds it, just tears it up. So you get all that set and everything ready to get your mind made up and think what you're going to do. It's not like ordinary takeoff, because you got to get that power going, go straight down the runway, and as soon as you get anywhere near liftoff speed, haul it all the way back, bump the tail wheel, and get it off the ground so that it climbs up and gets that. If you get about 30-40 feet off the ground here, by then the angle and the speed will lift that banner off the runway, and it'll have dragged that far, but it won't tear it up, and you tow it for a trial. If you tear it up, you just have to drop it and try again. And frequently, most people, in fact, I'd say more than 50% of the takeoffs did just ruin the banner, because they didn't get off quick enough. And that day, I was pretty, I guess the good phrase is, full of myself. I thought I could handle anything, and I could certainly do this without tearing up the banner. And I jerked that thing off and picked up a little bit too much angle, and got, with all the power and what little extra speed I had, I got probably, I think, 200 feet high maybe, which is not very much. And as I got there, the airspeed just stopped, and the airplane began to swerve to the right. I don't know why, because maybe I had too much rudder. I got it started, I don't know. But it started it swerved, and yet it was what I'd call planing. It was, the wing stayed absolutely level, it didn't budge. I expected the right wing to go down immediately, but it didn't. It just swerved around like that, and it pivoted on the CG of the airplane and turned within its own wingspan, right there, just like a model airplane could do, but a real airplane can't. Now, I haven't seen any acrobatic airplanes try this, and I don't think I would within 200 feet of the ground either. But it swerved around. I don't know the exact altitude. It certainly wasn't 500 feet. It was going to crash if it crashed. It didn't matter how high it was. It wasn't high enough. And swerved around, and I had full right rudder. All I remember the feeling I had. It was right, turning right, and I had full right rudder, and it turned all the way until it was lined up with the runway and the taxiway, which is on this side. And by then, it had ceased to swerve, slow it down to swerve, and begin to straighten out and begin to accelerate a little bit. I'm sure I had pitched the nose down as much as I dared to not let it just fall.
Did they have a stall warning? Was that screaming at you?
No, stall warning's right here in your hands. And lined up right with the taxiway, which was a disaster. That's where the problem was, because on down the taxiway to the end of the runway where I just left, there were 3 or 4 airplanes. I remember a TBM, and I don't remember what else, sitting down there in the run-up on the taxiway, and I'm going right over it. I can't control the head of the airplane at all. It just barely began to fly. I didn't look at the airspeed. I was scared to, but I imagined that it was maybe up in the 75, maybe getting 80 by then. I don't know. And I'm looking over the edge of the front edge of the wing on this, and here's all these airplanes down there, and that tow. I don't know how much that banner weighed, and that rope with it, and all metal, and that bar.
And
I could just
you're
picture all
essentially you're hanging on the prop then.
Yeah, and it's barely just between me and destiny right there was not a mile an hour in my opinion. I have no idea. I have no idea how it worked or why. I don't think it should. There's nothing I know would explain that it should work, but it did because I'm here. I know it did. But now my problem was I was going to have that. I was too low. That banner was hanging down. Now as you go fast, it'll go up, but as you slow, it'll hang way down. And it was hanging way down, and I was going to drag it right over these airplanes sitting there, and right tangled up with the props, and I don't know what all would happen. That banner and that weight could have hit somebody, or let alone tore up the airplanes. I don't know what would happen. And I just had this nice warm feeling. Oh, this disaster growing by the second here, and I got halfway to those airplanes, which was probably a couple hundred feet from them, and I finally got presence of mind and grabbed the tow release thing, which is a T-handle down here, and pulled that and dropped that banner. And I wasn't sure at the time whether I was over the first of the airplanes or not. I don't know whether it fell on them or not. When I went on by them, and I bet they were looking at that airplane going over them, about 100 feet high, right over them. They were probably looking pretty good. And the tow banner evidently fell short and didn't hit anybody. And I kept on going, and the tower didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. And I went off and flew around about an hour so they'd all forget. And I got another banner hook up and so forth, and went about my business. Did it right this time. But that was a pretty scary moment because I could just see disaster for all four of those airplanes down there. And I was also pretty, like you say, heartbeating. I have no idea about the whole feeling through this whole thing. Once that thing really stalled and quit going that way, I was just out of control, just hanging on like a balloon. And I had no idea why that would happen. Nothing in my mind explained what was happening. I didn't know what to do.
Thank God for those automatic flaps, huh?
Oh yeah, they were down. Well, of course, if you didn't have automatic for this type of procedure, you would have put the flaps down anyhow. But they were down and stayed down. I didn't go fast enough. You got to go 170 to blow them up. I didn't hear near that fast.
So after you came into the ops room afterwards, nobody said anything to you about it?
Nobody said anything to them. They were probably waiting on me to say something. I know they all know about it. Ain't no question about that, but nobody ever said a word. I never heard a word from anybody. I expected to be called into the commanding officer's office the minute I got down, but nothing ever happened. I've had several little things like that. Should have happened, but didn't happen. But that was one of them where I should have been thrown right out of the Navy at that time. Of course, I really, if I judged myself, I wouldn't have fussed at me too bad because I was doing the right thing. I just overdid it a little bit and was a little bit too exuberant. And back in those days, you have to remember the atmosphere. And Dick Bond going under the bridge, the high officers, the brass, so to speak, of the Air Force, encouraged young people to take all the chances and run all the risks they could. That's why they crashed so many and lost so many.
Yeah.
You know, they lost, I forgot the number, something like 9,000 military pilots during the 4-year period of the war in the States, just playing around like that. Not from crashes that were caused by engine failure or something, but from playing around.
Right. Yeah, the number of deaths, non-war deaths, is incredible. I was just reading an article recently, and it was about a group. It was the Red Tails, actually. Mm-hmm. There's a movie coming out about the Red Tails, and there was an article in my flight journal about them. And they had close to 50% of their losses were not in a war condition.
Well, that's not the same category. I'm talking about people deliberately doing things that cause them to crash or lose or get killed. But the category you're talking about of non-operational, operational is everything but combat. Yeah. Combat operational is one thing.
Accidents.
Non-combat accidents is a much bigger number.
Yeah.
a lot of other things happened there, all the engine failures, and the F-8's going to all 8 of those. There's 8 that's operational but not combat, and it wasn't somebody doing something deliberately. They just made a mistake.
When Bong flew under the Golden Gate Bridge, that was probably in a P-38?
It wasn't a P-38, yes.
Because that's what he was known for flying, yeah.
I think he was flying out of, what's the big Army Air Force field at San Francisco? I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't have been Alameda, that was Navy.
Yeah, that was Navy. No, there's a big Army field there. In fact, I think there's several around San Francisco.
Well, there's one called Travis. Is the
Travis,
main one.
that's the one I was trying to think of. That's where the C-5s first went when we built C-5s.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Bong was flying from. But they didn't fuss at Bong about that. I think the commanding officer called him in, as I remember the story, but didn't fuss. Just said, "Don't do that anymore. You know, you're scaring people," or something like that. But people were going under bridges left and right, and between trees, and flying over their friends' houses. It was countrywide.
Okay.
And it's amazing, didn't more people kill themselves? But it also separated the pilots from the boys.
Yeah. If you lived through it, it was a learning experience.
That's exactly what it was. And that was pretty well accepted in the military at that time. They accepted that much loss. They figured if they didn't keep them alert and eager and all, they wouldn't make good pilots, you know. So.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't encourage going about to crash an airplane, but they certainly encouraged the atmosphere. Go out and try it out. There's so many cases that I know of where pilots flew airplanes they weren't checked out in so many times and get away with it. And I was reading the women's Air Force story the other day, and those women frequently flew airplanes they had not been checked out in. Make a ferry trip.
Yeah.